Here we are in week 8, Culinary Arts 1132. What that means to you is that you have passed Culinary 1130, which is beginning baking, and you're on to applied, well, which is it's just a great semester. So it's the second half of baking. Week 8, my favorite week of all time. So what we're going to do is we're going to make laminated doughs, and laminated doughs are where we make a dough and a butter block, and then we combine the two, and what we're creating is layers of dough and fat, butter always, that create that very flaky, delicious texture that we're looking for in a croissant, in puff pastry, or in your Danish dough. We look at laminated doughs in kind of the category of puff pastry, which we're going to make right now. Puff dough has no yeast and no eggs in it, and so it is only leavened by the steam in the butter. Croissants, egg, a little bit of sugar, and maybe a little bit of yeast. Danish, very heavy in butter, very heavy in yeast, a very different dough. All three laminated, where we're going to take the butter and create a butter block and then fold that in. In that folding, we call it laminating. We're going to lock in that butter, then we're going to laminate it. And laminating, we're creating the layers of the butter and the dough, and that just makes deliciousness. And so that's our goal. And there's certain things you have to look at. When you're creating a laminated dough, always use a very sharp implement on it, because you don't want to cut through it and seal the dough over the butter, because we want that butter to expand and be a part of that dough. We want to dust the flour off. That's going to be really important. So what we're going to look at is we want to make sure the dough doesn't stick. We're laminating it correctly, but we're going to come in every time and dust our flour off and then do our folds and our lamination. Always important. In proofing puff pastry, we don't proof. There is no yeast in it, so there's no need to. But we got to make sure we kind of keep that gluten very cold. We almost underdevelop these doughs, which makes for a better dough, certainly in Danish, absolutely underdeveloping, underproofing works better for the dough itself, especially when it hits that hot oven. It can be a little finicky. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to make puff pastry. With puff pastry, no yeast included in it, and so it's not dough that we have to worry about rising. But what I'd like to do first is to be able to create my dough. Then I'm going to do my butter block. Then we're going to do the lock-in, and I'm going to show you how we're going to laminate it every single time. Laminated doughs are made one day. They have to rest overnight, and then we work with them the second day. So this is a 2-day process. A lot of bakeries, what we would do is make those doughs, and they'd always be staging the next day is kind of how we work blocks. So we're going to add, we have 2 different flours, so it's creating a little bit different crumb. And this is a nice big batch of puff pastry too. And once you taste puff pastry from scratch, you'll never go back. It is so good and so delicious. We're going to make fresh apple turnovers with it, which is always really good. I'm going to use a dough hook. I have water, and my butter is nice and soft. This is not in a butter that we're going to incorporate as the butter block. We're just kind of adding it for a little tenderness to the dough itself. And so I'm going to go ahead and add my water. And this is dough we're not really trying to create a gluten window on. We're going to underdevelop it. We're going to make a nice cohesive dough, but we're going to make it so it's a little underdeveloped so that we can go ahead and work with it right away. Cold water brings cold dough, which is going to keep the gluten set, and we don't really want it to be activated for us. And so like I said, I have my butter. And we'll let that come together. Incorporating this butter as well. We want it all to mix together. And I'm going to just let this rest on my bench, because the next thing we're going to do, let me show you what we're looking for. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our butter block. And with that butter block, we're then going to, we're going to laminate it together. We're going to take the dough, the butter, lock it in, and then do our first turn and our first lamination. Turn this down a little. Got a little crazy on me. There it goes. It's pulling itself up over the, incorporating all the dry ingredients, that butter, very well emulsified inside of it. Like I said, I'm not trying to activate any gluten, but I really want it to be a really nice, well-mixed dough. So I'm not going to leave it on for very long. I'm going to have a little piece of plastic wrap. Let me get this stuff out of my way. I'm going to come in here. We're just going to bench rest it. Puff pastry is a part of the pastry shop and a part of the savory as well. Puff pastry is a vol au vent, a boucher. You make a beautiful consomme and you want to float a little fleuron in there, we're going to do it with a beautiful piece of scratchable pastry, and it's just going to make that consomme sing. Okay, I think that looks good. I'm going to show you what I'm looking for. Like I said, I didn't leave it on the mixer very long, but I want my dough to come together. There, I knew I had a spatula somewhere. All right, it comes out. You can see, just round it real lightly. The dough is, like I said, mixed and very nicely mixed together. So we're going to drop that there, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my butter block.